when we talk about tyranny, I think everybody, I know that it's my natural inclination. Everybody thinks, the civil realm. They think about government, right? So they think, politicians mean tyrannical. But God, you and I both agree, God has established, three primary spheres of government: the church, the home, and the state. And would you agree that tyranny, God has, I would prescribe to biblical patriarchy. God is the father. This is the father's world, and he works through fathers. There are civil fathers, familial fathers, ecclesiastical fathers. So in the church, it's men who are elders, they're fathers, spiritual fathers. And in the home, it's the husband's the head of the wife, and the father, the children. So God, who is the father, in the father's world, works through fathers that he has appointed in each of these three spheres: home, church, state. And I would argue that when a politician, when a civil magistrate oversteps their bounds, the jurisdiction that God has clearly prescribed to them, then that's tyranny. But that's not unique. That can happen in the sovereign sphere of the home, and that can happen in the church. So a pastor can be tyrannical, a husband can be tyrannical. And I think part of my problem, I did a post about this, a while back, but part of my problem is, guys like the Gospel Coalition, they would be the first guys to jump on a husband's tyranny in a marriage. Yeah. Right? So they would say, like, if a husband said, and not like if a husband told his wife to sin, okay, then that's clear. But if a husband just said, I don't want you to dress that way, then there are a lot of beta pastors, slimy, effeminate, pastors who would say, well, oh man, I don't think that's appropriate for a husband to tell his wife how she should dress, and you know what I mean? And they would get involved in that, right? Like, so if there was tension in the marriage and that became a point of tension for the husband and the wife, not wanting to do what the husband is asking, the husband saying, commanding his wife down to the way she dressed in certain regards, then that would probably be brought to marriage counseling. Eventually it's going to cause tension. And I feel like 90% of pastors are going to side with the wife on that one and say that the husband, that's outside of his jurisdiction. Yes, he's the head of the wife, and all while carrying their complementarian cards, but they're going to say that's too far. This is tyranny. You need to back off. She is not required to submit to you. And then we move to the civil realm, and all of a sudden the Gospel Coalition and John Piper and everybody else is writing articles about how submit and everything. And I'm like, if we're going to be fair biblically, when it comes to a husband and his authority, the Bible says the wife should submit to her husband in everything, right? So everybody will quote Romans 13 and say, oh, well, it just says submit. It doesn't say when the government acts righteously. It just says submit. So that implies even when the government is acting unrighteous. Okay, well, that's an implication. That's an inference from the text. But if we want to just look at what a text plainly says and just move over to this sphere over here, the sphere of the home, the Bible says that the wife should obey her husband in everything. 1 Peter chapter 3 says that, like Sarah, calling her husband Abraham her Lord. So if you're looking at like degrees of authority, it seems like the husband has way more authority over his wife than God ever gives in terms of authority and jurisdiction to civil magistrate over citizens. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, absolutely. And if you think about what they would say, and you got to catch them out of context, because if you were to make this argument all at once, they would know what you were doing. But if the government came out with a dress code for your wife, they would say follow it.
They would.
If your wife's employer has a dress code for your wife, they would say follow it. And so what they've adopted is this kind of upside down, kind of perverted pagan ideology, where essentially what you've got is this hierarchy that essentially starts with the state up here, and they've got the ultimate power. Whatever they say goes, and you got to do it. And the one who has the least power is actually the family unit. Mm-hmm. And that's not how God's system works. God's system doesn't work that way. It's actually opposite of the way God's system works. I think you look at the Old Testament laws and you see punishments for adultery are very harsh. They're essentially punishments for it's what you would punish someone for sedition in a country, because it's essentially, you're a turncoat on the primary unit of government, which is the family. Right. So that's why the punishment is so harsh. It's like you have betrayed the one most important part of God's spheres of sovereignty, spheres of government. The family is the primary unit of the government that God gives us. Right. And so not only are they beta pastors who would be like, side with the woman no matter what, but they also they've inverted God's authority structure. We have different spheres of authority, but the primary unit, in my opinion, is the family that God gives us. And they want that to be the weakest and the one that has the least authority when it actually has the most.
You're absolutely right. I've heard it said before that if you think of like home, church, and state, it's basically the state is authority over virtually everyone, but a very, very small amount of authority. The church is authority over some people with a kind of like a medium degree of authority. And the home, fathers, especially with their children, husband with a wife, but especially fathers with children, have virtually limitless authority, but over a very small group of people. So it's like a little bit of authority over a lot of people, civil government, some authority over some people, ecclesiastical government, pastors and churches, and then like virtually limitless authority, but over just a few people, the home. The father has authority for the children, what vaccine they get, what goes in their body, their diet, what they're going to eat, what they're going to wear, what they're all those kinds of things. Like I have a 4-year-old, a 2-year-old, and a 1-year-old, and I'm making every, like me and mom, but me ultimately as the head, and then mom is really just, she's executing the things that I've decided for our family. But we're making every single one of their choices. That like our kids, we're not doing Montessori, our kids teach us who they are, show us who they like. No, we're telling them who they are and we're making decisions for them. And
we're buying their clothes for them. We're doing, they're doing what we're doing. They're eating what we're eating. Like
that's right.
Yes. And this is why in God's system, people look at the Old Testament law, they think it's barbarism. No. See, if a husband or a wife is to go commit treason against that primary governmental unit, that's such a serious thing in God's view that requires the penalty that a treasonous person would get, which is the death penalty. You know what I mean? So this is the thing. So what's amazing about this is, you mentioned sort of the pastor, commands that you get covenant eyes, right?
Right.
Like here's the thing, like, I could command that to my 13-year-old if I had one. I could say, we're installing this, and if you want to use the internet, this is how it's going to be. Like, but think about this for a second. It's almost like when your pastor does that and kind of tyrannizes you in that way, like they almost are treating you like their child. Because if I had an adult son and he came to me and said, "Hey, Dad, like I'm struggling with pornography. Like, what do I do?" Like at that point, even then I wouldn't command him. He's out of the house. He's an adult. Like I would be like, this is what you should do, son, but I'm not going to command it because that's not how a relationship works anymore. So it's like, not only are they tyrannizing you, they're treating you like a child, like as if you're a 13-year-old living in their house kind of child. Right. It's like, it's so twisted when you think about it. And we'll talk potentially about, could a father tyrannize? Yeah, a father can tyrannize, and we'll talk about how to define that. But it's just so crazy. Anyway, I just had that side thought when I was thinking about that. No,
that's a good thought, right? It's not only tyranny, it's demeaning.
It's demeaning, yeah.
No, you're absolutely right. Thanks for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you would consider supporting Right Response Ministries, we'd be incredibly grateful. You can do so by going to rightresponseministries.com/donate to give your gift of any amount. If you're not able to support us financially, that's okay. You can still support us in a great regard simply by subscribing to our YouTube channel, clicking the bell, and of course sharing our content with all your friends and family. We can't do this without you, your support, and your prayers. So thank you.